Welcome to Scale Model Basics. I'm Tim Kidwell, and we're going to talk about annealing photo-etched metal. Now, annealing is not the same thing as tempering. Tempering, you're using heat and quenching to make a metal harder, stiffer. What we're going to be doing with annealing is making the photo-etched metal more malleable, easier to bend. Now, you may ask, why do we want to do that? Well, let's take this piece for instance. Photo-etched metal, particularly thicker photo-etched metal, it can be stiff, and what it will tend to do is return to its original shape, especially if what you're trying to do is bend it, right? So, for instance, if we wanted to bend this piece around a radius or a curve like this bottle here, you can see that that's potentially going to crimp. It's going to try to snap back to its original shape. So what we want to do is use annealing so that it is more easily bent around this curve or shaped around this curve and then attached without trying to snap back to its original shape. So what is annealing? Annealing is bringing the temperature of your photo-etched metal, which is usually brass, up to about 500 or 600 degrees. It's gonna start glowing a little bit red, but it alters the molecular structure enough where it makes it a little bit more bendy. You're going to need some tools. First, you're going to want to get yourselves a pair of pliers or tweezers that have a rubber grip on them. This is going to get hot. Heat can transfer down the pliers or the tweezers, and you want to try and make sure that you don't burn your fingers. Also, you don't want to actually hold on to whatever it is that you're going to be annealing, because you don't want to have a brand of, well, in this case, Alpha Moon Base on your fingers or your hand. We saw how that went in Raiders of the Lost Ark. The other thing you're going to need is a heat source. Now, I do not recommend that you try to use a candle. It doesn't get hot enough, and you're going to basically just put a lot of soot on your part. So use a torch. This torch is one from a hardware store. You can get it anywhere. So I'm just going to go ahead and start it up here. Can't see it too awful well, but remember, you want even heating. And I'm just gonna flip this over real quick. So you can start seeing that color change. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip this over so that you can see it from this side. You can definitely see that there's that color change, right? Now, if this thing starts to glow red, you've definitely gotten it annealed well enough. You can see that it's starting in some of those spots. You can definitely see that it's starting to turn red. Around the edge there, right down through. All right, I'm gonna turn this over. Yeah, there, it's starting to, you just see that hint of red. So, you do not need to quench it. You just need a place for it to cool off back down to room temperature. Not your self-healing mat, because you don't want to melt it. You don't want anything that's going to catch fire, so like a glass plate or a ceramic dish of some sort is perfect for that. As I said before, you don't need to quench it, so that means you don't have to drop it into water or oil or anything like that. You just want it to come back down naturally to its room temperature. When you're able to handle it again, you're going to see right there, that little bit hasn't really been annealed. So I'm going to grab it from a different corner, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to anneal that, just so that everything has been annealed. And that's one of the nice things about this process, is that if you don't quite get it right the first time, you can always go back and you can do it again. Now, fine photo-etched metal doesn't take nearly as much oomph to anneal as a thicker piece. I mean, that makes sense, right? So when you're using finer photo-etched metal, for instance, like this cooling jacket for a 1/32 scale Spandau, you see there's a fine mesh there. You come at this with a flame, And it's not going to take much. You see what happened there? It's not going to take much at all for that to go away. That's not what you want. So there are other options rather than bringing a flame to the party, like a hot plate. What you want is a hot plate. Now, these you can get at any home goods or hardware store. They're fairly inexpensive. But what you want to make sure that you have is not one of the ones that has a solid top on it. You want to have one that has the exposed filaments, okay? And when you turn it on, you're going to want to go to high, right? And get it toward the hot end, as hot as it can get. And that's going to get around that 600 degree mark. I'm just going to turn this one on, get it all the way maxed out. And you're going to start, you'll see it start to heat up and warm up pretty quickly. So the filament has come up to temperature, and you can see it's getting pretty hot and a little bit of a red there. So again, you don't want to do it out here toward the edge. What you want to use one of the inner coils. And again, remember, pliers, because you don't want to touch that. That's going to suck. Pliers and rubber grip on your pliers to help with the to dissipate heat, right? And then this isn't going to take very long at all. Look at that. You can see that it's discoloring that metal, and you can see the metal is starting to curve already. So you just want to try and get your annealing done as evenly as possible. And remember that discoloration is normal. So I'm going to turn this over and just get back here to the other side. And that's really all that is going to be required to anneal this piece. There we go. Yeah. And that, we're just going to let it cool down, and it's going to be ready to shape. Now that the metal has cooled, we can go ahead and shape it, right? Now, again, we're using this Alpha Moon Base photo-etched metal part as an example to just show you that it's not nearly as springy as it was. Remember how easily it just sprung back and tried to hold its shape before? Now it's much more easy to shape, much more easy to bend. So if we were to put it around a curve as sharp as what this bottle of micro crystal clear is, it's going to be much more easily shaped. Look at that. It didn't spring back, but it is holding that radius much more nicely. So when you're shaping it, then it's going to be easier to shape, right? And then you're going to be able to glue that down, and it's going to stay put rather than trying to pop back to its natural shape. So that's one example that we can show, and I'm actually very proud of that. Another example would be using this drill bit to help shape the fine piece of photo etch for the cooling jacket for the Spandau. We can shape that around this smooth part of this drill bit here. And again, it much more easily shapes, right? It wants to hold that shape instead of springing back to the shape that it was initially, which was flat. Now it's very easy to go ahead and shape it to what the model is going to require. So that's how you anneal photo-etched metal parts. Now, for the examples in this video, we used brass. There are manufacturers who use stainless steel for their photo-etched metal parts, and that's fine. You can anneal it the same way. However, you're just going to have to adjust for temperature, right? So when you're doing it, just make sure you're keeping an eye on it, and once you start seeing that it's starting to turn red, then set it aside. Remember, you can re-anneal if it's still not as bendable or as shapeable as what you want it to be. Just go back, anneal it again, and let it cool, and then test it. And then once you've done it a couple of times, it'll start to become second nature to you. If you're particular, you can go ahead and get yourself a infrared thermometer, and you can use that to see how hot you're getting your metal. as a note of warning, if you're a kid and you've watched this and you're hot to trot to use photo-etched metal on your next scale model, that's great. But if you need to anneal something, make sure that you are getting a parent, another adult, somebody responsible to come in and help you. Somebody responsible is not your friend who is the same age or a year or two older, or a brother or a sister, unless they're an adult. All right? These things get hot and they will burn you. So whether you're an adult or a kid, make sure you're using proper safety measures, okay? Don't touch these elements. You end up cooking your hand, and you don't want that. Don't point this at somebody, point it at yourself. Don't do those sorts of things. You're gonna end up in the hospital, okay? So just be cautious and make sure you have somebody around to give you a hand. Thanks for watching. I'm Tim Kidwell, and we'll see you next time.